honestly, for about a month after I came out of jail, I was getting nightmares. I was still not back on my feet. I was still not steady.
This is episode number 60 of The Inspiring Talk with Chetan Mahajan. Welcome guys to The Inspiring Talk. My name is Vijay Gautam. I'm host for this show. Each week I interview today's most successful and inspiring personalities to help you realize your inner potential. Welcome guys to yet another episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast with my guest for the day, Chetan Mahajan. Guys, imagine being arrested wrongly and you have to spend 2 months in jail for someone else's mistake. Well, that's exactly what happened with my guest Chetan a few years back. He was put behind the bars for the case against his employer. After this episode, Chetan was terrified and had nightmares, but he didn't let that define his life. He wanted to make something good out of the darkest phase in his life. He went on to write a fairly popular book called The Bad Boys of Bokaro Jail, published by Penguin. Chetan has served in several corporate leadership roles in his life before he packed his bags and moved to a remote village in Uttrakhand with his family. He runs Asia's first writing retreat called Himalayan Writing Retreat, which offers a wide variety of retreats and workshops for writers. He is a TEDx speaker and passionate blogger. I met Chetan at Professional Speakers Summit in Chennai, where both of us shared the stage. And I was very inspired after listening to his story and invited him to share the same with you. On this episode, we talk about how Chetan landed up in jail, how was it like to be there, how he dealt with that phase of his life, and story of moving to live in a village and lot more. Guys, before we dive in, if you're listening to the Inspiring Talk podcast for the first time, make sure that you subscribe to the show so that you won't miss upcoming episodes with amazing guests. And if you have been listening for a while, I would truly appreciate if you could leave a review and rating for this show wherever you listen to it. Now, without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome guys inside this episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast. Chetan is here with me. Chetan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah. So we met for the first time in Chennai last month at Professional Speakers Summit, where you and I both were speaking there. And when I got to know about you and your story there, I wanted to share it with my listeners. So before we talk about really, get into the conversation today, I would like to know how's life there in village and what's keeping you busy?
Well, life is good. Very good, actually. It's a lot of beauty around us. It's clean air. And what keeps me busy is really two things. It's teaching and it's writing. So I write and I also teach people how to write. And it's very fulfilling in many ways.
What are the benefits of living in a village as compared to living in a city?
Well, there are, both cases there are trade-offs. When you live in a city, you make a trade-off. You decide that you will be more comfortable with, let's say, traffic and pollution and crime and some stress and maybe, just air quality and things like that. But you have access to occupation, opportunity. You have access to what most people would call good schooling and so on. And when you live in a village, you're doing another set of trade-offs. What we are trading off for is nature, is cleanliness, is a very simple life, which is not hurried or hassled. But in that process, I can't order pizza. I can't pick up the phone. I can't go to a mall or watch the latest movie. And, how you make that trade-off, I think really depends on who you are. But personally, just being who I am, I'm much happier in a village kind of a setting than in a city kind of setting.
So how far is it from the nearby city?
Well, depends on what you call a city. From Delhi, it's 9 hours by road. The nearest city where we get all our supplies and where you have like a big bazaar and Max and one mall with a 4-screen multiplex is a town called Haldwani. And that is about 3 hours from here.
Mm-hmm. So then you are in pretty remote area.
Yeah, to give you a sense, our gas agency is 30 kilometers away. The nearest petrol pump is about 30 kilometers away.
Wow.
So it is you have to plan life a little bit.
So what's the reason behind relocating to the village?
Well, like I said, it's really about the trade-offs, and you live in the city because you think that there are benefits. So the first reason why most people live in the city is because it's a default. It's a habit. We got into professional life, our career, and we decided that we realized actually it was not even a conscious thing. You just know that if you have to do a job in a big company and you have to build a corporate career, you have to be living in a city.
Yeah.
So it's not a conscious decision that you make, and then it becomes a habit, and we just continue to stay there. And sometimes there are things which force you to question that habit or that default decision. In our case, it was really about when my son Anhad, he started wheezing at the age of 6, and we would go out on holidays and we would do various things, and he was perfectly fine. But the moment we would be in the city, which in this case was Gurgaon, NCR, he would start wheezing very desperately. We went and visited the doctors and we met various people, and everybody said that, if you have to live here, it has to be like this. You have to put him on medication, buy nebulizer, stuff like that. And that was the kind of tipping point. That is a place where we really started to question, why do we have to live in the city? Why does it have to be this default? And is there another choice that we can make? And so we explored and we traveled a lot and we met lots of people. And then we finally decided that we did want to leave the city and move to a village. So we left almost exactly 4 years ago. And we've been here for these past 4 years. And at least in hindsight, the decision has been an excellent one.
What are the different roles or different, work that you have done before you thought of moving to the village?
Well, before I left the city, I was a fairly traditional corporate career. I started, dabbled in a few jobs, and I landed up in advertising, which I really enjoyed. I spent 4 years in that. Then I was in the learning and development space with a Tata company called Tata Interactive Systems. I was there for 8 years. And I was based in Chicago that time. And I also earned my MBA from a business school called Kellogg. Then we moved back to India in 2007. And we've been here since. And basically, over the last 10, 11 years of having been back, I've been doing various kinds of work, general management, a couple of startups, but all in the education and training space. So that's really been the background. In my last corporate role, I used to run a company called HCL Learning Limited.
Before you moved to village and before even you took that responsibility for HCL, you landed up in jail for all the wrong reasons.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about how you ended landing up in a jail and what was that period for you like?
So this was one of those, corporate accidents where unfortunately the innocent party often gets to bear the brunt of it. But I had just joined this company called Everon, which had once upon a time been a darling of the stock markets, but that time it was struggling. It had been acquired by a new management and they had pulled in a lot of fresh talent, and I was part of that turnaround team. And I just joined in October. And in December, there was a big blowout in one of our centers. Now, the context is that actually when I got into the business and I started looking around and I started looking at what all was actually there in that division which was handed to me. I was supposed to be in charge of one division of the business. There was actually nothing in that division. There was just a whole bunch of, there was no skeleton in the cupboard because there was no cupboard to start with. The whole thing was just a sham. And everything was just kind of whitewash, except for one small business which was in the coaching and test prep space. And in that small business, the only successful unit was the one in Bokaro.
Okay.
And we had a terrible flame out in Bokaro. A lot of our faculty left and all the parents were up in arms. The company had made a lot of promises which had not been kept. And it was on me to take a decision what I would do as the leader of that business. So I decided there was only one thing to do. And remember, my DNA was, having worked with the Tatas and with MNCs. So I never had a doubt about where my company would be in something like this. And so I flew down to Bokaro. I met with the parents. I told them that we are not snake oil salesmen or some, shady company. We're a very strong company and we now have a very strong backing and the right kind of intent as far as doing business is concerned. And all the promises we had made would be kept. But the parents weren't really interested because the parents said that, we've heard this story before and we don't trust. I mean, they had lost faith in the brand, the Everon brand.
So
And
that means a lot
so
of rumors were happening about the organization around.
yeah, so there was a lot of discontent. People had come and made promises. The staff there had repeatedly made promises, but even the staff weren't being able to meet them because they didn't have the resources. So one thing led to another, and the parents said that, look, if we don't get an instant refund of all our money, we are going to file a police complaint. Now, this was a Sunday, and there were hundreds of parents, so there was no way to do the refund instantly. And so they actually filed the police complaint, and the police came and arrested me. And the cop said that you have 24 hours. If within 24 hours, every single parent will pull back their complaint, then we will free you. Otherwise, we're going to put you in jail. And as you can imagine, because I did go to jail, the parents were not convinced. They did not pull back the complaint, and I did land up going to jail. And it was very, very scary for me. It was frightening because you can have an imagination, you can have some idea or some sense for various other places where you might think of going, but jail is never on that list of possibilities where a guy with my background would land up. And I think the biggest fear was the fear of the unknown, because the only thing which gives you any impression of jail is movies. And jails are never nice places in movies. People are getting beaten up, they're getting raped, they're getting, killed, murdered, all kinds of things. So I really was very, very petrified. And that was the biggest thing for me. So it was terrifying when I was sitting in that police jeep with those 4 cops around me. And it was late night on a December, so it was well after dark when I was taken to the jail. It was positively scary.
So Chetan, you have mentioned about going into fear of unknown, right? Yeah. In that situation, we'll definitely talk about how you got out of there and, what were you thinking. One thing I quickly would like to understand from you is, how has that experience, first, let me put it this way. So has that experience helped you in terms of overcoming the fear of unknown in your life and other dimensions of your life? If yes, then how has it helped you to overcome those fears?
So I'm not a person who gets very afraid to start with. Usually I'm, even if I say so myself, but I'm usually fairly brave in adverse situations. And but Bokaro and the whole experience of going to jail and surviving it and actually making something good of it did give me the confidence of knowing that I would be able to turn even difficult situations around in the future. And actually moving to the mountains, moving to our little village here in the Himalayas was one such situation where we were dealing with a lot of unknowns. Because I had quit my career, we didn't know what the schooling, we knew what the school was like, but we didn't know how well our kids would fit in. It was a completely different frame of reference, different neighbors. I mean, we were complete strangers into this place where we came. True. We didn't have any friends or family. We didn't have any connections. And I think somewhere I got confidence from that experience that I can make it work because I'd done it once before.
Brilliant. So once you landed up there, what were you really thinking? Because that was something that you have never experienced. You obviously didn't have that in far of your imaginations that you will land up in jail, right? Now you were there. Have you went through any sort of denial that this is not me? I mean, it couldn't be happening.
The focus was not really, the emotion at that point in time was not denial. It was really survival because I was there. So there was no way I could convince myself that I was not. I mean, I was sleeping on the floor. I was surrounded by people who were, accused of various kinds of crimes. And I was eating jail food. I was talking to those guys in the local dialect. And I was there. So then the question was, how can I survive this and how can I make something good of it? And, initially that whole fear of how will I survive and how will I manage was overcome. My father turned up. He spoke to the jailer. I was put in a slightly different ward, so that that whole uncertainty became a little less, and the fear of being mistreated or beaten up or anything. I mean, I knew that I would be safe and secure, and I would get food. And strangely enough, the biggest problem inside jail, once you've taken care of your security and your food, is boredom, because you have nothing to do. It's digital detox. You don't have your laptop. You don't have your phone. You don't have any friends to talk to. Family also can visit only once a day, and my family was in Delhi. So, my father, my brother, my brother-in-law, lots of family people came in and visited, turn by turn. But even they would come for half an hour, 1 hour in the day. The rest of the time, I was entirely on my own with absolutely nothing to do. And that's when, I could have I had a choice to make. I said I could have, gotten depressed, and I could have, just kind of put my head down and said, why me? And kind of blamed the whole universe. Or, the choice I did make was to say that I'm going to make something good out of this experience. Even though this sounds like nothing good can come out of it, I will turn this around.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking at what were the positive, constructive things I could do while I was in jail. The first of those things was running. I was a runner. In fact, the morning I got arrested, I had gone out for like a 7-8 mile run in the local park in Bokaro, because we were training for a marathon, my wife and I. And so I started running. I started reading a lot, because that's one thing I've always wanted to do. And as you know, in our busy corporate lives, we never have the time for it. And the third thing I started doing was writing. Now, writing was something I was new to. I'd never written or published much before, just one odd article. But I just felt like, that was one more constructive way of being able to make something good out of it, was to just write everything down. So I wrote down the stories of all the people around me. I wrote down, what was life in an everyday basis in a jail. I wrote down what were the systems and processes, how money came in, how drugs came in, what were the different kinds of criminals, and what were the privileges various criminals had over the others. I'm using the word criminal generally, but this was a district jail, so it was a jail of under trials. But those were really the three things based on which I was trying to keep myself sane, was reading, writing, and running. And and when I left that jail, I had like 2 full notebooks full of scribblings.
Wow!
So it took me a month to get even bail, and that was really the inefficiency of my employer. But I finally did come out, and when I came out, it was end of January. I'd spent Christmas and New Year's inside the jail, and I'd come out with these two thick notebooks, which were full of my writing,
which later got published into the book. But initial idea was not definitely to publish whatever you were writing inside jail as a book, right? So that was totally, you trying to keep a journal of the experience that you were facing there and the kind of circumstances that you were in.
Exactly. So when I was there, it was just one thing to do. Instead of drinking or smoking or taking drugs, I was choosing to write. So it was just one more constructive, positive thing to do. At that point in time, I had no idea that it could ever become a book, or it would ever become a book. It was impossible to say what would come of it. But it was just trying to stay on the, away from the dark side. So,
or maybe also having conversation with yourself.
In a sense, yes, it's a way of having a conversation with yourself, and also noting down everything, because you otherwise forget.
Yeah, true. So how did the book thing happen after that?
So when I came out, I realized that what I had was not anywhere near a manuscript. And I actually bought a few books on writing. The one that is most memorable is a book called On Writing Well by William Zinsser. It's a fabulous book. And so I essentially became a student of writing. And I started teaching myself, how do you actually write a book? What are the various elements? What are the things I should do? What are the things I shouldn't do? And how can I make this, mass of garbled text into something which people will pay money to buy and read? And so I worked on it for a while. Honestly, for about a month after I came out of jail, I was getting nightmares. I was still not back on my feet. I was still not steady. Yeah. And then the case got cleared. My name was cleared. I also kind of recovered. I picked up the job with HCL, and I resumed normal life, so to speak. And that's when I started. I could actually go back to all the writing, and I started transcribing it into the computer. And after I transcribed it, and I had it as some kind of a narrative, I sent it across to Penguin. And interestingly enough, they said that the premise is very interesting, the broad framework is interesting, and if you're able to rework it and really kind of make, then they listed on like 15-20 things which I needed to do. They said, if you can do all of these things, then we would be interested. And they also hooked me up with a gentleman called Hussain Zaidi, who is quite well-known crime writer, and said that maybe Hussain will be able to help you and he'll be able to advise you. And with that arrangement, we then went forward and so I worked on it and I reworked on it and edited it some more. Then it was about a year after my release that the book was actually published.
After having that journal that published into the book, which was also kind of memoir for yourself, maybe otherwise you might have forgotten whatever that happened over there inside the jail. So my question to you, Chetan, now is, what is your definition of freedom?
I think the first definition or the first part of freedom is recognizing your own constraints. If I have to go to an office 9 to 5, if I have to do things especially that don't agree with my values, or if I'm being forced to work in a certain way which I think is fundamentally not in keeping with my belief system, then I would ask myself if I was really free. We all live in some constraints, and some of those constraints give us joy. I mean, I'm a father of two, and I think that's a beautiful experience for me. And so step one to freedom is to recognize what your constraints are, because a lot of us, like I was saying, we just go through life with all our defaults of, we have to live in a city, we have to do this, we have to do that, and we don't even question those assumptions. And that is that is kind of putting blinkers on a horse, because you don't want to see the other options, because the other options might be too scary. And the second part of freedom is, once you have these options available, once you have all these possibilities available, then the power to choose, to say that I want to do this and I don't want to do that. And a lot of freedom is really about your attitude. I mean, even if I were to talk about my own experience, it was a freedom that I had of, within any set of constraints, you always have some choice that you have to make. And that is part of the freedom that we have. So my choice to write instead of, start doing hashish or charas, which was freely available inside the jail. Or
is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you decide, or the choice to, leave the city and leave a comfortable, high-paying, corporate job, senior management role and all that, and to decide to move to a completely different life with a lot of uncertainty. So all of that is a definition of freedom. Can there be even more freedom? It's always a matter of degree. But I think the baseline is really understanding what your choices are, and then being free to make that choice, and having the courage, because often making that choice requires courage.
Having the courage to make those choices. I really love the way you have put the definitions of freedom. So after, you came out of the jail, were there any situations or the people or the kind of rumors that you have to go through, or have you come across them? If so, how did you manage that, or how do you deal with that?
So, see, I think I was lucky, because all my family, my close friends, they were all rock solid, and they never once had any question mark in their mind about my being innocent or guilty. They were always by my side, and it was really beautiful to have that kind of support. Beyond that, there were some acquaintances, and obviously people heard that he had gone to jail. So you would come across the occasional guy who would, look at you, or they would not ask openly, but at the same time, when they looked at you, you felt like they were wondering. Yeah. So there were always a few people like that, but nothing that bothered me, because really I don't care so much about acquaintances or people who I kind of meet once a year. As long as your friends and family are with you, the rest of the world, I mean, can go take a hike. I really don't care.
So after, you moved to a village, and obviously you had no plans of starting a writing retreat, which is Asia's only one. Are there any other writing
retreats? The only one that we know
of,
but maybe after this podcast they'll reach out to us. But yeah.
So you had no idea of starting a writing retreat, right? But no. Again, there was a brief moment of confusion, because you had no idea. You just quit the job and you were moving to this new village, and then you had no idea what you were going to do about, right? So what was that moment like for you?
So, when we left the city, what I had was a little bit of consulting, because I was senior enough that people would pay me for my opinion. But once I had left, and, I was out of the network, and I was out of, I wasn't being able to do as much of FaceTime and things like that. That consulting also quickly dried out. And then I realized that I was pretty much, basically I was unemployed. Saying that you're a writer is just a polite way of saying you're unemployed. and I had a family to support. I had 2 kids going to school. My wife fortunately had a small income, because she's a clinical psychologist, and her practice, which was thriving in Gurgaon, had reduced, but she was still doing work on phone and Skype. But it wasn't just about the money. It was also a professional crisis, because I wanted to be doing something productive. I wanted to be gainfully, working towards something. That's when I realized that, it's not just a challenge, it's also an opportunity, because now if I have to rebuild my life, and in the village, there's nothing, there are no jobs, there is no, real opportunity. A couple of NGOs around, maybe you could work with them, but I was either overqualified or uninterested. And so I realized that it was actually an opportunity to build something which would really be what I would love to do. If your hobby is your job, then you don't have to work for the rest of your life. And I figured that if I can, create some kind of work for myself, which I feel passionate about, which I truly enjoy, then it can be the best of both worlds. It can be a source of income, and it can be something that so the hobby and the work kind of fuse into one, and it becomes a positive experience.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
with that goal, I started looking at what all was there in my kitty, what all were my interests, which I would like to make into a career. And I do have a lot of hobbies. I run, I hike, I ride a motorcycle, and I've spent 22 years in the corporate world before I'd moved.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of possibilities that were out there. So we tried a lot of things. I went and taught at a local business school, and I created tour maps for motorcycle companies and all kinds of things. And then kind of hit upon this idea of the Himalayan Writing Retreat. What was the Himalayan Writing Retreat? When we started off, it was just a very fuzzy notion saying, since I've published with Penguin, people would take me seriously as somebody who can teach them how to write. And after my book had come out, lots of people had come to me, people who were similar to me in background, saying, I really wanted to write a book, but I don't know how, I don't know where, how did you learn, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of drew up my wish list of all the things that I wish I had known when I was going about my book publishing kind of journey, and created a curriculum out of that. And then we kind of hung out the shingle. And the first one, we didn't have anything. We didn't have a website. We didn't have any kind of database. We didn't have any marketing mechanism. I had this blog that I used to write called Uncity, which is really about leaving the city and moving to the village. And on that blog, I made a small page called the Himalayan Writing Retreat, and we just put the lowest price that could get by, and put together a description. And I called my friend Roy Abraham, who was a copywriter in Bombay.
Mm-hmm.
And between the two of us, we kind of strung out a curriculum, and we decided on the session plan and everything. And the surprising thing was that 7 people turned up. And after those 2.5 days that they spent with us, 6 of them left giving us a 5-star review.
Wow.
So that kind of gave me the confidence. I was, since I'd come from training, the feedback was the most important thing. Everything else was detail.
Yeah.
And that gave me a lot of confidence that, there is something out here. And then I started kind of looking at the writing retreats, and I realized that they're a way of life in the US. And there were lots of people who were interested in various things. And I also felt that there was an opportunity to do blogging. And then I spoke to our mutual friend Kuruba, and Kiruba said that, I'll come and I'll do the blogging course for you. So all of that worked very well together. And so the next year we had about 6-7 events.
Wow.
And it's been like that. But all of this time we were basically running these events from, rented places. So it would be a friend's bungalow with 5 bedrooms, or it could be a resort where we would hire out 5-7 rooms and stuff like that. What happened over time was that we realized that it would be the simplest if we could have our own place. So I had bought land, and I was kind of starting to build my own house. And instead of it being a house, then it became a physical place called the Himalayan Writing Retreat. And that's where we've been doing our events now. And it's really caught on. We have people coming in from all over, teachers as well as students from pretty much all over the world, and including the US. Lots of people come from the US.
Well, that's
and
amazing.
We have now an event calendar of about 15-17 events in a year.
That's amazing. It's very interesting when you go through that kind of situation or the challenging phase in your life and then turn that into something which is meaningful for the rest of your life. Would you have realized this passion of yours about writing if you had not been to the jail?
Unlikely. I think it's unlikely that I would have become a writer. That was really, just getting cooped up with nothing else to do that I discovered writing. Then, of course, I started studying it, and I got better at it. And I'm still a student more than a teacher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yes, if I had not gone to Bokaro jail, I probably would not have discovered writing.
Chetan, when you look back at that experience, because you have been able to turn that pain into the power of yours. So when you look back at that experience, so how do you feel, or what emotions comes to you, to you when you look back at those experiences now?
So there is some amount of pride, because I was handed a bad deal and I was able to convert it into something worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel grateful, because I think a lot of the things that are involved in all of this are luck. It's at a point in time when there is no other writing retreat in Asia of this sort, no physical destination for writers in Asia. It was at a time when Penguin was interested in my jail story, and so they actually picked it up. So there were many things which could have failed, which could have fallen through in the journey. And taking all the credit would be a little foolish of me. But there is definitely a very strong element of luck and just fate, because of which things have worked out. And I also feel very grateful for the family that I have. I mean, I don't think any one person can make this journey. If me and my wife were not completely aligned and she didn't get on along with me and say, let's go, this would not have happened. So I think there's a lot of things which kind of really conspired and brought things to this point, which have made it all so positive and so good for us.
That's amazing. So if somebody is going through the situation that you were in, or going through the darkest phase in their life, what would be your message to those people?
Well, my message really is that it's never as grim as it looks at that point in time. When you're standing at the bottom of the valley and you're looking and everything else around you seems to be black and bleak, there is even then some place, something good that can be built out of it. There is something constructive and positive, and you can try and make the most of wherever you're at. I know that sounds cliched, but really, if you persist and if you have the right attitude and you come at it with positivity and say that I will make something good of this, very often the universe kind of helps you along, just like it did for me.
Amazing, Chetan. Now it's time for the enlightening round. Are you ready?
Sure.
So, Chetan, your story has inspired a lot of people, and the kind of work that you do has inspired, so many people out there, and through your book as well. So, what inspires you to do everything that you do?
It's love for what I do. If I did not love writing, I wouldn't have set up the retreat. If I didn't love writing, I wouldn't be writing myself. I wouldn't be blogging. So I think it's really finding love in your work, which makes it meaningful and joyful.
Which one daily habit do you believe has been game changer for you in your success journey?
Well, I'm a morning person and I rise up early, and that's a great time because the rest of the household is asleep and I'm able to do my writing undisturbed for a couple of hours every morning. And that's been a pattern, not just now as a writer, but even before, where I've always been a morning person. And I think that has been really helpful. And the second is also, I think, just being very aware of my fitness. So I stay very fit. I walk, run, do various things. And that just makes life so much easier and so much more fun.
So could you share a book or two that has influenced you personally in recent past?
Well, the one book I already mentioned, On Writing Well by William Zinsser, that's a fantastic book on writing. Another book that I think should do India proud is called Kissing the Demon. And that is by a lady called Amrita Kumar. And it's a book about writing again. It's a book on how to write a good novel.
Okay.
And brilliant book. And those two I think really stand out for me.
So Chetan, if you were to start this success journey all over again, what are those three things that you would have done differently?
First, I would try avoid going to jail and write a book outside jail. Second is I would have tried to make this leap much earlier. I think I stuck around in the corporate world for 22 years, and the initial part I did have a lot of fun. I enjoyed myself. But I had stopped myself enjoying myself quite a while back, and then I still hung around and kind of just went with the flow because it was difficult to break the habit. But I wish I had left a long time earlier. And I also wish that I had started writing earlier, because if I had started writing earlier, writing comes from writing. You get better as a writer from writing and by studying writing. And the earlier I had started, the better a writer I would have been today. So instead of starting to write at 42, if I had started at, I don't know, 22
24.
or 12, I would probably be a lot better writer than I am right now.
True. So could you share some online tool or app that you use on a regular basis, maybe that has helped you in becoming, let's say, better organized, or maybe disciplined, or maybe fit, or, generally that has helped you become more effective?
So as a writer, one of the things that we often need is an editor to help us relook at our work from a slightly different lens, and to evaluate our work and to look for not mistakes, but bad habits which have crept into our writing. And my favorite app is one called Hemingway. It's available online for free. It's www.hemingwayapp.com. And you can also download it for $20. It's a Hemingway app. And it's beautiful because it flags off a lot of things that we are taught to not do as writers. Use of passive voice, overuse of adjectives, or having hard to read or very hard to read sentences, stuff like that. So Hemingway is probably my most favorite app, and I use it even for writing like long emails and things like that. I run them through Hemingway because it just helps us unclutter and make our writing much cleaner and easier to read.
Awesome. So Chetan, we have come to an end of this interview. I have got one more question left for you, but before I ask you that question, if people would like to learn more about you and maybe get in touch with you, reach out to you, or maybe, possibly attend one of your retreats, what is the best possible way to reach out to you?
The easiest is to go to our website. It's HimalayanWritingRetreat.com. So www.HimalayanWritingRetreat.com is the easiest way to reach out to me. And then we also have a Facebook page and a Google presence. So you'll find all our contact information, my phone number, my email address is all out there.
So Chetan, here's the last question for you. So imagine that you are standing on a stadium. Let's say this one is the largest that has ever been built in the history of the world. And there are millions of people sitting on that stadium, and they are eagerly and passionately listening to you and would like to hear from you. And there you are standing at the stage, and you have got only 1 minute of the time to share the most important lesson that you have learned in your life. What would be your message?
Believe in yourself. Because if you have belief in yourself, then you will be able to take the most difficult situation and turn it around. If you have belief in yourself, then you will listen to yourself and you will understand who you are, because you will realize what you like and what you don't like. If you have belief in yourself, you will be able to follow the path of what you feel passionate about instead of following the herd mentality, which is what a lot of education and a lot of social influences do for you. So at the end of the day, you have to have confidence in yourself as a person, and you have to know what you care about, and be able to question the societal norms that are imposed on you. And you will not be able to do any of those things if you don't have enough belief and faith in yourself as a human being and in your abilities, as a person.
Believe in yourself. It has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for being here, Chetan. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Thanks so much, Bijoy. And it was a pleasure being here. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast. I hope you learned something or got some inspiration out of this episode. If you did, make sure that you share this episode with your friends and family by visiting theinspiringtalk.com/60. That is theinspiringtalk.com/60. You can also access all the links and resources mentioned on this episode by visiting theinspiringtalk.com/6060. Guys, I'd love to have your feedback about this episode and this podcast in general. If you have got something to say about this, so good, maybe bad, or something that you feel like sharing with me, then make sure that you record your voice message by visiting theinspiringtalk.com/speak. That is theinspiringtalk.com/speak, SPEAK. And I might feature that on upcoming episodes of the Inspiring Talk podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you in the next. Now, go out there and do something inspiring.